World War II began in September 1939 when Britain and France declared war on Germany due to Germany's invasion of Poland. This was not the only cause of World War II. Although the outbreak of war was triggered by Germany's invasion of Poland, the causes of the war were more complex. Other causes can be divided into long and short terms. One of the long-term causes of the war was the anger that felt Germany caused by the Treaty of Versailles. Another long-term cause was the failure of the League of Nations. September 1st, 1939. Germany invades Poland. German units, with more than 2,000 tanks and 1,000 planes, attacked the Polish defenses along the border and advanced to Warsaw on a massive onslaught of confinement. In fulfillment of its commitment to ensure the integrity of the borders of Poland, Britain, and France, declared war on Germany on September 3, 1939. The Polish army is defeated within weeks of the German invasion, and Warsaw surrenders in September 28, 1939. April 9, 1940. Conquest Germany, Denmark, and Norway. In a lightning attack, Germany attacks Norway and Denmark. Denmark is occupied in one day. German forces land in Norway near Oslo, the capital, and elsewhere to ensure the south. Germany also moves to make the ports of Narvik and Trondheim in the north. British forces intervene, landing at Narvik, Namsos, and Andelsnes, but will be forced to retire in the first week of June 1940. On June 10th, Norway surrenders to Germany. May 10th, 1940. Germany invades Western Europe. The campaign against the Netherlands and France lasts less than 6 weeks. The Germans concentrate their attack through Luxembourg and the Ardennes forest near the French city of Sedan. German tanks and infantry break the French defensive lines and advance to the coast, trapping the armies of France and Britain through the north. The Allies achieved to evacuate over 300,000 troops from Dunkirk to Britain, but France is emphatically defeated. Paris, the French capital, will fall to the Germans on June 14, 1940. As part of the armistice agreement France signs with Germany on June 22, Germany occupies northern France while the south stays free of occupation. A new French government, situated in Vichy, declares the neutrality in the war, but promises cooperation with Germany. 1941. German forces invade Yugoslavia and Greece. German forces invade Yugoslavia and Greece, helped by contingents from Germany's allies, Italy, Bulgaria, Hungary, and Romania, and they quickly subdue the Balkans. British forces sent to aid the Greeks are forced to retreat to the island of Crete. In mid-May, German paratroopers land on Crete and, after heavy fighting, defeat the British there. Yugoslavia and Greece are divided among the winners. June 22, 1941. German forces attack the Soviet Union. More than 3 million German soldiers, reinforced by 500,000 auxiliaries from Germany's allies, Finnish soldiers, Romanians, Hungarians, Italians, Slovaks, and Croats, and the contingent from Spain, attacked the Soviet Union on a broad front with the Baltic Sea in the north to the Black Sea in the south. 3 German army groups advanced to the Soviet territory. Millions of Soviet soldiers are encircled and forced to surrender. German troops continue to advance to the outskirts of Moscow. In December 1941, the Soviet Union launches a counteroffensive forcing Germany to withdraw from Moscow.
28, 1942. German forces are directed to Volga. German forces begin a new campaign to the east. This time, the goals are the oil fields of the Caucasus and the city of Stalingrad, located on the Volga River. In early July, German forces cross the Don River and mid-September reach the suburbs of Stalingrad. The Soviet Army Command decides to defend the city no matter the cost. Soviet forces fight for every street in the city. In mid-November 1942, the Germans take control of most of the city, but the Soviet defense has not been disrupted. In mid-November 1942, the Soviet Army launches a counteroffensive against the German forces in Stalingrad and quickly encircles an entire German army of 250,000 soldiers. February 2, 1943, the surrender. In mid-November 1942, the Soviet Army launched a counteroffensive against the German forces in Stalingrad and quickly encircled an entire German army of 250,000 soldiers. After months of fierce fighting and heavy casualties, the surviving German forces, which were now about 91,000 soldiers, surrender. In 1943, Soviet forces make the Germans back to the banks of the Dnieper River. The Soviet army remains on the offensive for the remainder of the war, despite some temporary ups and downs. June 6, 1944, D-Day. Allied forces landed in France, and more than 150,000 Allied soldiers under the command of U.S. General Dwight D. Eisenhower land on the beaches of Normandy, France. The Allies break the beachheads of Normandy and enter Paris on August 25, 1944. To the end of August, they released most of France. The Western Allies are surprised in December 1944 when German forces attack through the Ardennes forest in Belgium in an attempt to divide and destroy Allied forces. Allied air forces, together with a fierce American defense, blocked the advance of German troops and forced them to undertake a general retreat. The Allies gained a decisive victory in what becomes known as the Battle of the Bulge, and continued to attack in Germany itself.
June 22, 1944. Soviet forces launch crushing offensive. Soviet forces launch a powerful offensive along the whole Eastern Front. German forces are pushed back near Warsaw in late July 1944, and between August and September of the same year, the rest of the allies of Germany, Eastern Europe, Romania, Bulgaria, and Finland leave the war effort. Hungary, occupied by Germany in March, remains in the German camp. May 7, 1945. Germany surrenders. In mid-April 1945, Soviet forces launched a massive offensive against Berlin. In April 25, 1945, Soviet forces joined with Americans, attacking from the west at Torgau on the Elbe River in the central Germany. In April 30, 1945, as Soviet forces approached the command bunker in central Berlin, Adolf Hitler committed suicide. Berlin surrendered to Soviet forces on May 2, 1945. The German armed forces surrendered unconditionally in the west on May 7, and in the east on May 9, 1945. On May 8, 1945, it was proclaimed Day of Victory in Europe, VE Day.
In World War II, there were a variety of Europeans whose achievements made them stand out. These include Adolf Hitler. He was Germany's dictator throughout the war. He was a very cruel dictator whose ambition led to the start of World War II and the Holocaust, which ultimately led to the death of millions and millions of people. Benito Mussolini also stood out. He was Italy's dictator throughout the war. He aspired to create a totalitarian state. Benito and Hitler formed an alliance during World War II, which was part of the Axis powers. He was also considered the founder of fascism. Winston Churchill was also another significant people. He was the Prime Minister of the United Kingdom. He was one of the greatest wartime leaders, and he helped inspire the people of Britain against the Nazis. There was also a young girl called Anne Frank. She was a young Jewish girl who was one of the casualties or victims of the Holocaust. She gives a perfect example of Hitler's cruel and unfair treatment towards the Jews. Another important people was Heinrich Himmler. He was the head of Hitler's police. Under his command, there were millions and millions of people killed. And ultimately, there was Charles de Gaulle. He was a French general and the leader of Free France. Charles promoted and led the resistance of the French people against the Axis powers.
Here are some interesting stories that occurred in World War II. Albert Göring was the brother of an infamous Nazi leader called Hermann Göring, who was involved in the concentration camps. Unlike his older brother, he was not a Nazi and often risked his life to save those who Nazi hated. He moved to Austria after the Nazi rose to power and often spoke out against the Nazi party. When Austria was annexed by Germany in 1938, Albert's brother kept him away from the Gestapo. When the Nazis marched into Vienna, Albert started to distribute exit visas to Jewish residents. Albert managed to save hundreds of Jews as well as political dissidents during the war. He was arrested several times, but each time his family connections ensured him his freedom.